So this is Fugue 0.4.3. You'll see on the left it still says Bartok 0.4.3. Set up with the split screen here because I'm going to walk through some of the differences between um, beta Fugue and what's in prod right now. What's in prod, whatever I'm calling the prod environment, is fiug.dev v0.4 and no indication that it's 4.2, 0.4.2, but it actually is 0.4.2. What's on the right is Fugue Beta, and you'll see in the lower left-hand corner and in the prompt for the terminal, it's 0.4.3. All right, I'm just going to go through some of what I see are the changes. A big call out already is, terminal is obviously like a little bit different, lot different, whatever. I made quite a bit of progress on doing um, adapting more to a like sort of Unix or POSIX kind of API for a lot of these. There are minor exceptions, I think, with Clear and CLS. I think I've adopted some from Windows, but I'll show an example. And I think this is not anything necessarily new, but so you see, I can do CLS or Clear or whatever, and then help will show all the commands that are pretty much supported. I made some movement on sort of translating these things to actual files. Like, so for instance, cat is now a cat.js, and I worked some on the API for that. The terminal is actually running in an iframe now, and that's different in the way that it was just a module previously, and now it's kind of like on its own. I feel like messaging between iframes and keeping everything in its own frame, it gives me a lot more independence than just having it access as a module. So I sort of went up on that. I think I integrated the new tree, although the tree may already be in place. And you'll notice that the tree in the previous example didn't have all of the options enabled. Now you should see all options enabled, and most of this stuff should be working. I spent a lot of time working on file operations. Still some work to be done on that, but what I refer to as file operations are rename a file, rename a folder, all of the files within that folder get renamed or get put in the proper place. Basically just a lot of grunt work, and I'm not going to go a ton into those, but I've been working on those things over and over again. Finally, I just decided to pull it out into a module and write unit tests for those, and so that's one part of the application that's actually unit tested. I'm going to kind of switch gears and talk about what's actually pulled up here. Speaking of refactoring, some of the stuff that was in what was known as at first it was in the Fugue repo, and then I moved it into the Fugue welcome repo, and then now I'm moving that stuff out of the Fugue welcome repo, and I'm kind of moving it into something called Fugue plugins. You can see that the repository is selected as Fugue plugins there, and you can see I've cloned it where it shows open previous service. You can just load the Fugue plugins. This is something that's not new, but the Fugue plugins in itself is new. So I was saying that loading up a repo is not new, but doing that with having the plugins existing somewhere. I'm just going to pull up the README and talk about what the purpose is of Fugue plugins, and I'm going to move away from that hopefully very quickly. So plugins are kind of like what you would expect with Visual Studio Code. It's basically like plugins give you functionality to open a file to show that file with syntax highlighting, and then also to run the file whenever whenever it's clicked on. Right now, I don't really have the concept of a plugin, but the idea of a plugin goes along with this idea of store. And what I mean, I don't have an idea of the concept. I have an idea, but I don't have, like, Fugue is not actually supporting plugins. Right now, what Fugue does support is this .templates folder. So when you clone a repo that has .templates in it, you should be able to access, let's say, for instance, an foo.adoc. So any file that is of adoc type will be able to be opened. So that's kind of templates. Fugue also has this concept built into it that there are a bunch of files, and here is the syntax highlighting for it, and here are the icons for it. Currently, that's kind of all over the place, and in the future, I would like to bring all that together. This is why I call the repo Fugue plugins instead of Fugue templates, because I would like to see templates move more towards a, this plugin gives you syntax highlighting, it gives you the icon for the particular file, and it gives you execution if that's possible. I'm going to talk a little bit about execution because I think some of the things kind of changed in that sense. Previously, you had this preview up on the right here next to terminal, and that's sort of something that I invented and added up there from as a sort of break from Visual Studio Code. And so what you'll see is that it's a little bit awkward. How do you get to that? How do you get to that preview? There's this new preview icon, and then how do I make all of this stuff go away so that it looks like it's just preview and nothing else? Now, since like I said, I've been moving more towards like having preview be its own executable thing. Now you pretty much have to execute. You have to say preview, and you can either give it the name of the file that you'd like to open, and that file has to be within the current directory, or you can just say preview, and it'll preview whatever is the currently selected file. Now, how do you get out of that? In the past, you just would select another file. For the time being, you just make sure that the iframe is selected, that we have some kind of selection going on here, and you press either Control or Command, and that'll pop up a quit button. In the future, things to make this go full screen, which we had a button for that previously. Those will actually make their way into those buttons, depending on who knows where they live. The cool thing about using this as sort of an executable is it's very intentional. I clicked on preview, and it tells me to select a file matching star.star. You could say star.md. I click on a file now, and now as I edit that, so I'm going to edit something here and say hello at the top. As I edit that, we should be seeing changes to the preview. Obviously, there's some issues with that, but the idea of making this executable is to address like a lot of the weird issues I was seeing around, is this thing locked, is this thing not locked, whatever. Sum it all up by saying that now preview can be thought of as an executable, and since it's an executable, it's a little bit easier to hold and to do something with. So preview was a big change. Like I said, I think I implemented the tree, which was the new tree that I was planning on using. But in the case that I didn't implement it and it was already implemented, at least I hooked it up a little bit more, or a lot more. You'll see that in the past, the new file and new folder icons weren't working, and there was this 3-dot menu here. The 3-dot menu is now gone, And the same thing that you would get if you said new file right here or new folder right here, you'll get by clicking those icons. And those are actually hooked up. Context menu's hooked up, and so the same with the tabs. I hid anything that wasn't working, and I only have things that are working in the context menu, and most of the things that are working um, basically like are working correctly. I was hoping to show what the deal is with this output here. I thought it might be useful whenever you hit preview that, let's try this one more time. We're going to try star.md. I was hoping, and yes, I'm back on preview, but okay, I'm selecting something that matches star. Okay, I'm typing in hello, and that's still not working for whatever reason. But yeah, I would have to show you what I would have to show you an update actually working in order for me to show you what's up with this over here. But next to the little sunshine icon, there will be like one bar for each time the file changed. So basically gives you an idea of how many times the file changed that you were accessing. And then you can click this link that's here to kind of get to like what the file looks like. It's basically just about like giving you context for the change that had just happened. Yeah, so I'll take a detour real quick. I promise I think that I won't come back to preview. I'm going to talk about one of the cool things that came in this time, and that is ink. I was able to finally get ink working thanks to some changes that happened in with ink outside of my control. I'm going to go ahead and type in preview. We're going to do star.ink, and we're going to reselect this file and see we have ink running. And there's syntax highlighting in there. I worked on building the syntax highlighting out for that, and I worked on getting the template running for ink, which gave me execution. And if you have a sharp eye, you can see that I'm also trying to work on C#. That one's a little bit more involved, and I'm not completely done with that. The interesting thing about having this rolled out into plugins is now all of that plugin action occurs separate from v0.4.3, and that's, you know, to kind of bring it back. That's kind of like the whole point of this. What I mean is the point is to show that you know, some things have changed. And one more thing before I go on. I had drawn your attention earlier to the lower left-hand corner showing you the version, and you'll notice if you have a reasonably sharp eye, the version wasn't correct over here, and I think I'm going to refresh this. I think the version here was also not correct. Anyways, now the version is actually attached to the package JSON for Fugue, and whenever I do a rollout, basically there will be like the correct version down in the bottom left. I think there were also some issues around README. You see how the tab was not there. It's possible that was one of the things that they got fixed. That being said, like the list of things that got fixed is, I guess, reasonably long. I'm going to go back to the change logs for this. So you'll see at the top the thing I mentioned about package JSON. To really summarize this, I've done a lot of work on iterating on Git, so that whenever you delete files, it actually deletes those files on Git. Whenever you move files, it moves those files on Git, and I mean specifically GitHub. There was some work on the service worker to support all of this stuff and to make sure that files are handled properly. And I think the editor changed a little bit, like working on a change to make sure that like that scroll position and history and things like that are actually remembered. Don't think I'm completely there yet, and I think the thing that I'm moving more towards eventually will be like this will be built into the service worker, and all changes will be unified in the sense that like changes for GitHub and changes for the editor will kind of sit right next to each other instead of kind of all over the place. That's sort of a back end thing, basically just talking about it. I say back end, heavily loaded word. I mentioned that the terminal had made some changes and the preview made some changes. And basically I suggested that like a lot of this is like related to file operations. I'm going to go into one of the things that I know has changed, but I don't know that that I've called it out. You'll see the preview bar over here next to the editor. That didn't exist with the previous, and that to me is like very useful because when you're dealing with long files, like being able to search the file, like a miniature representation of it is reasonably important. I did have some option of turning that on or off, but not exactly at the place where I'm ready to support lots of use cases. I had to kind of build that from the ground up using a canvas because I didn't see any solutions that pleased me. So it's lacking somewhat in features, and I haven't rolled that up into a plugin that's made available to the world at large. But I will work on that eventually. But there you go. There's a preview. I have some other things in the works. I'm not going to go too much into those, but basically I would like to have sort of pane splitting and that kind of thing working properly so you could have like a special arrangement of whatever, kind of windows you want. That's not quite there yet. And, it would involve me thinking of editor state from a multi-window kind of point of view or multi-pane point of view. And right now I'm pretty much just thinking of editor state and editor tab state just from a single pane point of view. That's not what I'll be going into for 0.4.4. 0.4.4 is going to be focused on performance because what I found is after you've cloned a few repos in this, basically that's downloaded to browser memory, and I don't know whether you call it RAM or hard drive or what, but it does start to slow down after you've the overall system starts to slow down after you have tons and tons of files in there. And I've done what I can to address the slowdowns, but ultimately I think it comes down to I need to make sure that all the files are not downloaded. That comes with the plus of if you don't have to download all the files at first, then the repo sort of clones a lot quicker. That after I've improved that, I'll have to come up with some way of presenting to the user, hey, would you like to clone this for offline use versus are you connected to the internet and are you planning on using this from an internet point of view? This does sort of go away from what my original intentions was. My original intention was like this shouldn't be like a fully cloud connected kind of editor. It should be you can operate on this locally without having to be connected to the internet. That's still a priority to me, but seeing as how I don't really have any registered or paying customers, I'm going to go forward with this particular change in focus, and I can't really support everything. So for right now, I'm throwing it all in with sort of like a GitHub flow, sort of a, you are connected and we're going to download files, as we need them versus downloading them all at once. The ability to do the sort of offline mode is still in there. It's still available. To me, it's not as big of a pull, simply because, I already worked it out and it seems kind of unwieldy. I'm going to go ahead with the online view, as I mentioned, and work on performance for that for 0.4.4. 4.3, there may have been more stuff in there, but I think maybe in the interest of not going too crazy on this, I'm going to cut it short. I will mention, sort of briefly that I am creating this blog, and I will be posting this to the blog. What I'd like to see is YouTube thumbnail and maybe some kind of write up for every release. And then I'm also trying to focus on being a little bit more straightforward about like what I plan for particular releases and kind of sticking to that. So you'll see, present, planned, released, random. Some of the things that I'll want to go into with this blog are things that I think about as I'm coding and that kind of stuff, so that maybe some of the conversation I would have on the blog can be at least channeled in the right direction. I do daily recordings, or almost daily recordings to myself, talking about things that frustrate me about life and coding and that kind of thing. And I kind of feel like maybe the medium for that is not like a release video, so I'm going to try to keep the releases as focused as possible. Also, in the sense that I want to have an idea about what I'm doing with that particular release and how much time it's going to take, and go ahead and get that, stay focused on that particular thing as much as possible. I mean, I don't want this to turn into like a straight out job for me, but I do feel like there's some benefit to having an idea of where I'm going and, sort of staying on task. And that's what I want to do. So that's part of the act of, cleaning up and getting this more like ready, so that at some point I can actually call this a version 1.0. It's just basically getting it to a point where I'm establishing some kind of cadence. That's also why I'm recording right now, because I noticed myself started bleeding over into the 4.4 realm, 0.4.4. And I didn't want to bleed into that. I wanted to like sort of ceremoniously mark, hey, this is what went into this release, and sort of chop it off. What I'll be doing is I'll be moving what's in Fugue beta. I'll be moving that over to Fugue. So this version in all its glory will be going away, and whatever is here will move into there. And then with beta, I'll go ahead and start working on some of the changes that I was talking about for the 4.4, 0.4.4 release. If you're interested in more details about what went into this release, you can always go to that repo that I was talking about, Fugue blog. It's cross-HJ Fugue blog, and you can navigate to notes from Fugue beta, which basically these are notes that haven't been integrated into the blog yet, and you can just go through and look at all of that. But I have a feeling you might not be, but if so, that's not a huge problem. Anyways, I'm Harrison Cross. Appreciate you having a look at this. I don't know what it does for me if you don't respond to me, but for the record, I'm pretty much just doing this for like historical sake, and to keep myself on some kind of cadence, with minor interest to at some point get this to be like something marketable. But I'm in no way near anything marketable right now, so I don't place a lot of priority on that. Anyways, I'm gonna wrap it up with that. If you went through the whole video, thanks. Just a quick note: if you are watching this, send me a note saying, hey, I've thought about this particular thing or whatever. Like, interaction for me like makes a lot of difference, and if there's something I could do for you, the chances of me actually doing it for you are a lot greater if you're interacting with me. I do watch a lot of YouTube, or at least enough to know that like there's you're supposed to say like and subscribe, and I've heard people make appeals to like, hey, it really helps the channel out. I'm not really trying to have the channel just yet, so just hit me up and saying, hey, I'd listen to your video, be appreciated. Not a guilt trip, just letting you know, like, human interaction is a cool thing, or can be a cool thing. And I'll leave it there. You see, I'm hovering over the stop recording, and I'm gonna do it.